Hi, it's Ken, KNS Brakes. We have another 2020 New Year model car in the shop here. We have an A90 Supra owned by Jordan Best from Garage Therapy. So he has put a whole bunch of horsepower in his car and has taken it to VIR, already getting down to a 203, by the way, which is pretty quick. Anyway, one of the things he wants to do is look at the brake pads for some street pads for the car. A lot of you will know the BMW type brake pads are generally pretty dusty. So for that particular situation, we have good Carbotech product here. They're 1521 compound, they're street compound, these red pads here. And I just wanted to show you a couple of things comparing those to the OEM pads so you know what you may expect when you see. So we have the used pads off of Jordan's car. These are the BMW or Toyota pads. Here's the front and rear, as you can see. Just a couple things of note. It's a little hard to see because it's used, but they do have a friction code of FF on the front and GF on the rear. That means the rear pad's actually slightly more aggressive than the front pad, which is probably not unusual for a balanced rear-wheel drive car like the Supra. Anyway, a couple other things of note. You'll see that these weights are put on the front pads. Those are generally there to dampen vibration and maybe keep brake noise down. That's one thing we don't have on the Carbotech pads. But we would expect these to be much lower dust than the factory pads and no noise and almost no rotor wear or anything. It's not a track pad. This is a street pad. Like I said, you're going to cut down the brake dust to almost none. So what we're going to do next is go ahead and go over and install real quick on the vehicle. It's a pretty simple pad change. This is a typical 4-piston front BMW type shape, and then a single piston floating rear. And so we'll get the car on the lift and continue in just a moment. Okay, we got the car on the lift. We're going to do the front brake pads first. Pretty typical 4-piston caliper. This is all you need to get the pads out. It's pretty easy. So we got these pins here that go through the hold down spring. All they do is pop right out. Take some of the pressure off. You can usually pull those right out of there. Now these pads are about maybe 30 or 40% worn, so the pistons have come out. So usually you can pretty much depress things by hand. Get the pad out halfway. And now we have these pistons most of the way in. Fold pad out. They do put a bit of a chamfer on the edge of the pad, so it's on both sides, so that's fine. Either way works. That should slide right in there. Need a little more room. This works for that. Carefully look in there. Pistons back in. There's one. Now this pad will keep these pistons from coming out when you push those back. Let me get those in. Same thing, just a little bit more room. Get a pin back in, get it most of the way through. A little pressure, get the other one started. Careful with the blunt object. You can clearly hear when they're seated. And that's that. Brake pads are in. Double check. And done. We'll go to the rear now and start on those. Those are almost as easy. These are street pads, no bedding required. These rotors do have track use. There's a little bit of pad smear. We expect the Carbitex should work fine with that. I might edit that out. I'll just leave that in there anyway. All right, so we're at the rear of the car now. Single piston caliper. We're gonna try and flip the caliper up to get the pads out and see if we can get the new ones in. We'll have to rotate the piston back. Still pretty easy. I got a 14mm socket and a 17mm wrench. Basically, we're just gonna hold this pin, the lower pin, and take the bolt out. With luck, we'll be able to rotate the caliper off enough to get the pads out. If not, we'll just take that second bolt off. Should be pretty simple, and yeah, no, this doesn't work that way, so that's not a huge problem. The calipers. Now the caliper will just slide right off. To the side for a moment. The pads just ride in these clips. Pull those right out. If you do wish to use a little lubrication, only right here where these ears ride in the retaining clips. You don't need to smear grease all over the back of the pad or all over the piston. That's pointless. Before we do that, however, in this case, we have a piston that we need to rotate back into the caliper to gain room for the replacement pads to be installed. If your pads were worn all the way, this piston will be out pretty far. So they do make tools that fit in these little notches to rotate that. It's also pretty easy to do it with a pair of needle nose pliers. That's all you got. So we think we're gonna go and you can see just rotate it like, and you should be able to see that piston going back in there. To get the piston back in, you're going to need to rotate it and compress it in order to retract it. So we started rotating first, and that probably gives you some clearance. And then we're going to use some channel locks to push it the rest of the way in so we can get it back over the new pads. If you have a disc brake caliper tool, it may do both of those operations at once, but most of you will use this type of method. There you go, the bolts should be around the floor. The next thing for this car will be to run the brakes. We'll see a lot less dust, and then we're going to put some nice aggressive race pads on this and get out to VIR. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.